Most well known for the story Pass-Ins, but I've got a dozen others that are up that people would probably recognize, like Better Living, the Drop of Moonshine series, the Into the Depths series, and all of those things. I'm also currently the most followed author on FIMFiction, just about under 30 away from breaking 6,000 being built. No, I broke 5,000. That's about to break 6. I think.
You were saying earlier today 5970s.
Yes.
You're coming up on 6,000.
Yes.
Oh, I'm Tony Genovese, also known as Gary Oak on FIMFiction.net. I'm a pre-reader of the Royal Guard. I'm also a creative writing major in school, and I'm an oddball on this panel because I don't even have 500 followers on FIMFic. I don't have any super crazy stories in the Canterlot library, and I don't have anything with 4-digit upvotes. But my accomplishments include writing pony fanfiction and submitting it to university workshops and getting A+ on it. Episode scripts, they're called spec scripts. No, I didn't actually write for the series. I hypothetically did, but I actually didn't. That's what a spec script's supposed to be. I've also written a story about Scootaloo that I actually got Scootaloo's voice actress Madeline Peters to read at last year's BronyCon. And on top of that, partly for my pony work, I also won a fiction award for Outstanding Achievement this year. So I'm on the right track in real life.
My name is PycoPie. I've edited for two fics with over 10,000 views and 4-digit likes. My first story was featured for like, I think it was 5 minutes on FIMFiction and got dropped off. And I haven't been back since, but I spent a lot of time editing, pre-reading. My degree is in psychology, so I hope to bring a little bit more of a psychological, like, this is what, you know, people are attracted to, and there's a difference between like, you know, stuff in the past that may be popular and isn't now, and stuff in the past that wasn't popular and is now, and why that kind of happens.
So the first thing that we have to say in any panel on getting popularity for your stories, the 3-word answer is time travel to 2011. Yes, that's how you get popular. But for most of us who do not have the power to, you know, warp space-time to our whims, we're here, we're now, we're publishing in 2014. So what do you do to get a story attention given the current state of the fandom? What are things that have worked for you guys in that regard?
Unfortunately, I was there in 2011, so I'm kind of the example of what.
Yeah.
Well, but you didn't post your story on FIMFiction until later, and there's a difference between you and K-Cat, who arguably at the time that you had just posted on FIMFiction, K-Cat's Fall to Equestria was probably the most read fic, and we don't know.
No, it's like the timeline is definitely like, it's like I lived on Google Docs for a little while. I didn't jump to FIMFiction straight away, but then while K-Cat was still finishing Fall to Equestria, I started to pull things over. First couple ones I got, hey you're stealing stories. Oh, well, I know, you're the real person. But yeah, so actually all of Pass-In's current numbers and all of my stories' current numbers are not including any of the numbers that they may have previously garnered on Equestria Daily, because there's no way to grandfather.
They track me down and say, I read this. So.
Yeah.
Just take a Sharpie and add like another 0 to it.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, okay, fine. you win the politeness award. I think a lot of
Canadian?
Yeah, you beat me. Ooh. Good job, Tycho. I'm
sorry.
Sorry. Wow. It's on now. I think a lot of, this may sound a bit jaded, but I think a lot of popularity actually has to do with being lucky. Yep. But the thing is, there are ways to go about it. You need to play to win, sort of. You need to, like, it's being in the right place at the right time, but if you don't try and put yourself out there, you're never going to be in the right place at the right time. So if you work hard, focus on excellence, keep trying to improve, keep trying new things, experiment, put yourself out there, enter contests, come to conventions, talk to people, just do everything you can, eventually you will get a break. That's my theory on becoming popular. Like, look, Harry Potter went through 36 rejections before it got published, and J.K. Rowling's the first writer to get $1 billion for
She
fiction.
disputes that.
Really?
Yes. Because the thing was, she was supposed to be the first one to get $1 billion from books, but part of it was movies, and she said she never actually reached $1 billion.
Oh.
There's $1 billion earned, but she had spent some of that while making it, so.
Okay.
Well, gosh, that just wipes her achievement right out.
Here's not her now.
On your bike.
That's still a billion more than any of us have.
But to bounce off what Gary was saying on it's like it is a matter of kind of being in the right place at the right time, but at the same time, it's like another way to kind of go is to get the exponential growth. It's like your first story, you get a few views, you get a few followers. Well, then those few followers, if they like what you're doing and you do continue, it's like this. This was something Wanderer D signal boosted on FIMFiction that the people on someone had an analysis of the most followed writers on FIMFiction, and they usually tended to a few things. It's like they are an author that has a flagship story, and they can have a bunch of supporting things that that are also fairly good and enjoyable. That is the definition of me. Past Sins is my flagship, and then I have a dozen or so others. Then there's ones that just have their flagship, like Kit Kat. That's the only story she's posted up, but it's such a massive flagship. It's like da da da. And then there's authors who focus on one thing in particular, like they just do comedies, or if you're short search explosions, you just are utterly prolific.
Unbelievable.
Romance is common. There's a lot of
Romance comedy. It's like because it's like your followers are kind of your audience, and if you're writing to them, then you're gonna continue to maintain the followers you already have, and you're gonna get more on. So it's an exponentially going thing, because it's like, hey, you have enough followers that when you first post a story, they alone can get you into the lower rungs of the feature box, and then oh look, there's a story, and that gets you more followers, and it's kind of it's a mass collider, I guess, and eventually you'll hit critical mass.
Yeah, the feature box is, I mean, it's an achievement in itself, but
Yeah.
the main thing about the feature box is that it's an accelerator. When you hit that feature box, all of a sudden your story is in the public eye for a couple of days, and the views from the feature box keep you in the feature box, and continue to accumulate extra attention on your story. So one good goal, if you want to get noticed, is to see what you can do to get, as Spencer was saying, that basic level of attention that's enough to get those multiplier effects to kick in.
Well, and the way to, when you look at getting attention, people they just look at numbers. And there's different numbers you can look at. A lot of people look at followers and they say, hey, at almost 6,000, and I did check it is almost 6, I was wrong, I apologize.
Yeah.
And then, it's 6,000 followers. Well, if you look at musicians or people on YouTube, they're not considered big until they have tens of thousands. The thing is, hundreds of thousands of people have read Past Sins. I mean, it's over the 100,000 mark, largely because of that initial boost. So how do you measure it? I mean, do you measure by the 6,000 people who follow him, or the over 100,000 people who've read his story?
Also,
and one of the ways to look at that is actually favorites on FIMFiction, and specifically the favorite to like ratio. A lot of it will determine exactly how many people really like your fic, because when you get people favoriting stories more when it's something that's a continual story, or where there's going to be other updates and stuff. Like there will be other stories for Past Sins that are kind of related every once in a while, or posts that Pinstruck will make. So people who follow Past Sins, they'll follow the story. So when he makes a blog post, he can say people who follow the story can be notified. The problem with that is that those people now don't follow him; they just follow that story. So it makes it hard to calculate.
Yeah.
and one thing to note if you're depressed about view numbers, in Canada, 5,000 copies sold constitutes a bestseller. So you know.
Really?
Yes.
Only Canada! That doesn't work. Wait. That's for a reason.
Yeah, that's because we only have, like 37 million people or whatever it is.
Aww, that's so cute.
Yeah. We're like kind of giant California, except cold.
Yeah. And sometimes lonely.
Yeah. Very
And
little.
it's like, just to make people balk, is like, that 5,000 bestsellers sold. That's the size of my hometown in Wyoming.
Yeah.
It's 5,000. And I know a town of 5.
Yeah.
It is a post office.
Yeah, it's a post office, general store, and miscellaneous goods.
Stop sign somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
No.
So yeah,
Or
I mean,
no signs.
when you're measuring, what a successful story is, another way to go off of it is sequels. And frankly, all the really popular stories on FIMFiction will have sequels by other people, or people will post up commentary, they'll break it down, and it gets extra media exposure. And you really only get that when something is, there's two ways to get that. It's good enough that inspires others, which usually also means it's not perfect. Because things that are perfect, you're like, I don't want to ruin it, but I still, I want more, but I don't feel like I can do it. Ponies is fabulous, but still a kid show, it's not perfect. There's a lot of stuff we want to explore, and there's a world to explore and stuff to add to. Follow Pressure has over 500 side stories written by other people. There's a lot of world that wasn't explored. It leaves people wanting more, and it's not perfect. Past Sins is a much more contained story. There's a lot fewer side stories about it.
But when it comes to fan art, there's more art specifically about the characters instead of just the world itself.
Yeah, Follow Pressure will have a lot more world art and people making OCs, and Past Sins will have a lot more dedicated to the story itself.
Okay. But anyway, let's turn this to, what can you do if you have a story that you want to get more eyeballs for? I mean, everyone here, I'm assuming, let's show of hands. How many people have a story that they want to get more views for? Yeah.
I'll admit mine is Little Sugar Shop 4. Because that was one of the ones I had the most fun writing. I wrote in and modified songs from Little Shop of Horror to get, I turned dentist into the Baron, or business Baron. And that one had the unfortunate happenstance of going live when Kate Cat posted the last few chapters of Fall of Equestria. It's like every reader that might have looked,
sometimes that will happen. So if your story goes live and it sinks, then you move on. You write other stories. Those other stories will draw attention to your back catalog. So sometimes there's just not much you can do. But let's say that you have a story you have not yet published. You're looking at how are you going to get it out there in a way that it attracts views when you get started. And what do you want to do in order to make it work? One thing that is going to be your most powerful tool is going to be word of mouth. If you have a followers list that's automatic word of mouth, you will post a story on FIMFiction, they will get notified. I'm just assuming that this is all on FIMFiction because that's pretty much where people publish pony stories.
Yeah.
But people will automatically get notified. Those are instant views, and if they're following you, they're probably going to like your stuff. So instant upvotes right away. Build up that follower list if you can. If you're starting from scratch, one thing that can definitely help is to try and build word of mouth in other ways. FIMFiction, for example, has a groups functionality. And if you have a story and there is a relevant group, like you have Twilight Sparkle reads a book, and there's a book of Library Fix, so that you can join Library Fix, and when your story goes live, click to add it to the Library Fix main folder, and people will get notified when a new story is posted to a group they're following, and so that can give them the attention that there's
that also lets you get your story to a target audience. So, for example, you're doing a comedy, like a road traveling comedy where Celestia and Luna and Cadence have broken wings and a broken chariot, and so they have to walk back to Camelot or something. I don't know, completely random thought. But it's like if there's a road comedy group that's has Wild Hogs crossover, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles inspired story, and things are in the same vein, then the people in those groups are the people you're writing that story who will really enjoy it. So it's like...
Well, and the thing about the groups specifically is that it's really easy to post to a group. And it's really easy to post to multiple groups, but a lot of other people are doing it too. So you will see a little bit less efficiency. You're like, well, it's seen by 5,000 people, right? It's like, No, a lot of people are submit to a bunch of groups. But
Sometimes it helps if it's a group that's got some submission guidelines and isn't just, oh hey, throw all your stuff in here.
Submission guidelines, groups that tend to see more people on the forums, like they'll have their forum posts, so the more active groups you'll see more of a response from. And this could be, you know, if there's 60 people in a group and 10 of them are on every day talking, you might get 5 views. If there's 1,000 people in a group and maybe 6 of them are on every day, you might get less. I mean, it tends to go that way.
But every little bit helps, you know.
You had a question?
It was more of an add-on to that. Once you get added to groups, if your story's good, you're going to get added to more groups without you even doing anything.
Yep.
Yes.
Like, you might submit it to 3 groups, and if your story's really good, you can look 2 weeks later, it'll be in 20. Just because people will add on their own.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've seen that happen a few times.
Yeah.
And posting it to Reddit can help too.
That did.
There's like the Pony Reddit and the Ponyfiction Reddit, so.
Yeah.
May I contribute to this?
Yes.
We're talking about audience here, correct?
To a degree, yeah.
I mean, I can relate to this simply through drawings, for instance. I mean, when I try my luck with DeviantArt, it's a big scam. And eventually it took me several experiments to figure out, hey, I can't rely on just DeviantArt. I've got to try several places. So then I made accounts on over 30 websites now. And in order to, you know, I'll know some people here, I'll know some people there. And, you know,
Yeah, if you really want to drive yourself crazy, I mean, you could post to fanfiction.net, you could try to get it to EQD, you could put it on FIMFiction, you could post to all the groups, you can ask people in the group forums, you could ask everyone you know, and like you can drive yourself mad trying to reach as many people as possible. So I will caution people, you can put a lot of work in to get more views, and it will technically work, but it's not necessarily worth the reward. It can feel kind of forced.
It can feel kind of like you're the door-to-door salesman.
Yeah.
I resemble that mark.
I'm sorry. We had a hand up over there.
I sell doors for the movie.
I'm still like kind of trying to find my creative voice right now. Like I think I want to do animation someday, but I'm also interested in writing stories, maybe fan fiction, maybe TV scripts. I don't know yet. So like, what advice would you give me to like find like what I'm passionate about, like a creative voice? I'm still trying to figure that out.
That's an interesting question.
Because yeah, that is a factor of big time. It's like if you're doing something that's a little off kilter for what's your cutie mark, then maybe.
I'd say there's, I mean, my instinct is to say there's no substitute for experience there. If you write a story and you enjoyed the process and you do an animation and it felt like a chore, or vice versa, then you'll want to spend your time on what's actually giving, what's being rewarding.
Yeah, because none of us are getting paid for this. It's like unless you do something originally, it's like copyright law literally prohibits making money off of these things, and so
it's trademark law, right? Not copyright.
it's law. It's like I'm no lawyer, I'm a programmer. But it's like if you're doing it for free, you might as well be ensure you're doing it for fun and it's something you enjoy.
And if you do eventually want to make money, start off not making money. I made the mistake with my YouTube channel. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do commercial, I'm going to do the ads and stuff like that on YouTube and stuff like that. But then it felt like I was measuring against something that I knew wasn't going to be successful from the beginning. So now I'm retooling it to where I'm not going to do ads. And it's going to be more rewarding.
You had a question back there?
I just wanted to have a tiny add-on. I know from experience, if you don't have fun, it will not end well.
Yeah.
I wrote this story, and after a while, it just got boring. It ended up, I just canned the whole project because I couldn't. I don't even know how to explain how bad it was.
Your soul has to be in it, otherwise it will just lose its vigor.
Otherwise, it will have no soul.
Exactly, yeah.
Actively do, I've been working on a movie for some time now, and I just figured out recently, oh my goodness, I've been forcing myself to work on this, but I just lost inspiration for it. I mean, a lot of the ideas that were from this story even actually now latched onto another
On the flip side of it though, writing is a job and you need to actually treat it like a job, but you can also have fun while you're doing the job, and sometimes the words just gush out of you when you're having a lot of fun and you're really involved in the story. But one thing that I've tried about a month and a half ago was write 1,500 words a day, no more, or no less, I should say. And since then I've cranked out around 60,000 words in 35 days, and I've even written over 3,000 on this vacation, which is pretty ridiculous. And I just get used to it. Stephen King writes 2,000 a day. A lot of professional authors write 1,000 a day. And remember this, 1,000 really crappy words on paper is infinitely better than 0 words on paper. So you just have to do it and train yourself and make it habitual, like sleeping. Your body and your mind will get used to it.
And a little known fact is Stephen King got his start writing fan fiction. So he wrote for a fanzine magazine in college, and he eventually published a short story that became what we know as Fate Cemetery.
So did George R. R. Martin. He wrote fanzines. For
So
fanzines.
and actually,
And it's like Lauren Faust has commented before that it's like if she had been, it's like fan fiction had been a bigger thing when she was like getting off the ground and whatnot, she would have done that too. It's like
Well,
that
basically
is
it is fan. I mean,
In a way,
it's fan fiction.
yeah.
She's like, these stories are like the stories that she came into My Little Pony with, and the characters she had were based off of how she played with the toys when she was a kid.
yeah.
And that's why a lot of the characters are the same but different. So
Yes.
That because of the fact that Fox owns.
Yeah.
Have you heard that part?
no.
The only pony Hasbro still owns the rights to from the original series is Applejack.
Right.
All the others Fox owns because of the movie that they worked with Hasbro to make.
Oh.
That's why in the original sketches, like Twilight Sparkle had her mother's color scheme. It's because when Lauren Faust was originally in development, she was going to use the 1980s
Yeah, Twilight Velvet.
Twilight. Yeah, but then she was no, you can't. We don't own that one anymore. Yeah, no. Fox. Proving they're evil yet again.
They did the best of a lot of things.
So I hand that with the unicorn one there.
Thanks. Okay, so back to the mechanics of, for
big
lack
time.
of a better word, what?
The big time.
Yeah. One thing that I've seen a lot of writers do, and I guess I was wondering if I could get your opinion on it, is it seems that when an artist who may not necessarily have a whole lot of attention or prior
Connections.
connections set up, they will write the majority of their story, or maybe the entire story, before even putting it up on FIMFiction, and then they'll put it up like maybe chapter by chapter.
Once a week at a specific time.
Right.
It helps a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Consistency. Your fans like consistency. An episode every week is consistent. People like it. What happens when you miss an episode of Ponies? You put it off a week.
Right.
You get angry.
Yeah.
They go, where are my ponies?
The other nice thing is that not posting a story as it's going live means if you lose the steam and inspiration, you don't kind of have to leave a story hanging. People going, oh, finish! But it also means that if like you're writing, it's like writing along, you get to the end, it's like, oh, this is great, but it's like, ooh, but there's a few threads I could pull back a little further, and just like going back and looking at the first chapter, it's like, oh, this thing I mentioned here turned into a big thread. Maybe I can make it a little bit more, like, tie the threads a little bit better together near the beginning and kind of just smooth out the whole experience.
Quality will go up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives you the opportunity to edit for sure.
Right.
The first draft of anything is junk. Everyone knows that. And the thing is, like, have you ever read those fics that just seem to go on and just kind of lose their direction? And that's probably because the authors they write a chapter, they polish it.
What's that story? That's the Discord one. That's
Like a million words.
Diaries of a Madman.
Yeah, that one. Like stories like that. It's because the author writes a chapter, polishes up a little, and then submits it. But what I advocate doing, not many people do this, is you write your entire book, if it's a book like fan fiction, you set it aside for a couple of months, and then you rewrite it, and you start posting the rewrites when you have a chapter buffer. And I mean, it's very hard to do, but I can safely advocate this because I did it with a 151,000 word long piece of writing, and
It's satisfying.
It is. It's very satisfying, and I was able to update every week.
Well, it's satisfying once you actually start the
Oh yeah, once you start,
yeah,
that's
Until
the,
then, it's just
the delayed gratification can be a beautiful thing.
I waited over a year to do that, by the way. So you have to really.
you have to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, you do.
That way. Yeah.
It will
Which,
sure.
for
follow
some
you.
of us, it's maybe not what we want to do with the writing. It's like the writing. It's like you're a creative writing major. This is I'm a programmer. I do the coding of the logic and the things, and this is just my creative outlet. So it's like I'm a little bit more okay just throwing up a little bit earlier drafts. It's not, but it's like I'll end up rewriting something usually before it goes up anyway. But it's just I won't wait 2 months.
Yeah, but speaking about being in it for the long haul, let me tell you guys, I did not get started in 2011. I got started about a year later, and I was coming in, a completely blank face, like I'm sure a lot of you are. My first 50 followers basically came from comments that I left on other people's blogs and other people's stories. Use the community to your advantage. If you start making connections with other authors, if you leave good comments on people's stories, if you trade edits with people, say, hey, I liked what you wrote, here's something that I've got, you asked about, looking for a pre-reader on your latest project, want to get something together. If you get other people invested in you as an author or your story as a story, that word of mouth, you can, build those personal connections. And there's no better feeling than having somebody with 2,000 followers, make a blog post and say, oh, hey, my friend Bob here just, posted a new story. You've never heard of him, go read it. And all of a sudden you get this flood that's like doubled what you would have gotten from a feature box. So,
Some authors will actually boost other people more than they get views for their own stories.
yeah.
Totally Not a Brony has done a lot of great fics, a lot of shorter crack fic type stuff, and he can signal boost, and he'll signal boost people, and they'll get an extra 150 readers that day. He's had a story that in the first month only had 67 readers because there was a really out there story that he liked, and he's like, I know it won't appeal to most people, but I guess a little sad it's only 67, but at the same time, people will trust your judgment, and they might say, you know what, I don't really like this type of story, but I'll at least look at this other story, and if it's something else that catches people's eye, which is a big thing about becoming popular, is you need to be able to at least stand out on your own. It's not all signal boosting, it's not all posts in different places. Interesting titles, interesting art, accurate and interesting descriptions.
It's like it's actually an interesting thing that it's like I can kind of claim, I think, as an author is a little bit, is it's like I was one of the first that really tried hard to make sure I had commissioned images. It's like Past Sins had that big, like, I always call it the kind of Romeo and Juliet thing because it tells 2/3 of the story in quick glimpses. And but then before, and before that, it's like the one I commissioned, Clockwork Cat, who it's like her rendition of the pony Shell for Better Living was that was just a screen. She'd done that when EQD picked that one for the cover art. That was when EQD picked the cover art for you. And it's like I apologize for her because she's like, oh, you use it. They kind of picked it for me, but here, actually, I like your style. Could I get a commission for this? And so she did the cover for Creeping Darkness as a commission.
And if you have an artist who's popular who you're getting commission from, you can actually get several hundred views from an artist who has 1,500 followers on.
Yeah, because sometimes artists ask, do you want me to post it up? It's like, go ahead and let them. It's like it's their art, let them post it and let their followers enjoy it. It's just another bit of wonderful art from them, and
it's generally mutually beneficial, and it's pretty much agreed upon. It's just polite to always credit people, so they'll credit that you got commission for the story.
Yeah.
And having good art, interesting titles, interesting descriptions, and stuff like that builds with all the outreach you do. If you have an interesting title, just called, Twilight Sparkle and the Can, you're like, what? Twilight Sparkle and the Can? I don't. Like, you at least go and look at the description, but like if you just see that, or if you have like an interesting description, a weird words, stuff like that catch people's eye, they'll start to pay attention to it, and then they'll look into it. And a lot of the people won't like it. They'll decide, nah, but a lot of people will. And so that's how you get that multiplying effect.
I saw another hand back there.
What if the writer's paranoid?
Sorry, what?
What if the writer's paranoid?
Can you give it like paranoia? It's like, is the writer paranoid to spiders, or
put this idea in my story. But what if a person sees this and says, this is stupid, I've seen this so many times. What if it's one of those things?
Oh, a paranoia that the story idea has been overdone.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like.
Or what if you're ripping off something?
Well, that's the thing is you can never be sure what will. It's especially since, just to get us back on topic, the big time. It's like Brony Writer has his story series that was meant to be just he was trying to make fun of human and Equestria fix and all that stuff. You know which story I'm talking about. What is it called?
Me? Oh, I'm terrible at names.
I don't know what it is either, but it's his avatar on Skype.
Exactly, and but it's like he wrote the story and it was meant to be a thing, but people took it seriously. It's like, oh no, this is an awesome human and Equestria story. Or it's self-insert or something, and now like the character's getting married to Celestia, and it's like all the readers are cool with it. It's like it's a sin. It's a sin that there's other people like if you look at it in a fresh story, it's like no, but because he pulled people in, and it's like you never know quite how lightning's supposed to strike, because like back when I originally started posting past sins, I was hoping it would be as popular as Better Living. And it's like it was like Better Living, then Creeping Darkness was a little older, and then when past sins started, it's like yeah, it kind of just got away. It's like that one. It's like that's one thing about trying to make the big time is it's good to keep trying, but it's like you can never really predict what story it's going to be.
Just you can never predict who your friends are going to be. And I tried that before, and I only worked 1/20th of 1 out of 20. Yeah.
But yeah, the one that comes to mind, I mean, with the never predicted it is that who here has heard of Absolute Anonymous's Pinkie Pie Watches Paint Dry? Yeah, that's. It was a story, I mean, it was moderately popular, and then all of a sudden season 3 came along and there was an episode in which Pinkie Pie watched paint dry.
And it's sometimes weird how that happens, because there was a fic, I don't know its name, that like was basically Lesson Zero. Where it was like Twilight was late for a friendship report, and it was an author in rendition, and then the show did it.
Yeah.
Well, this is how fandom works sometimes.
Yeah.
They're going to pick something, either they're going to find any quote, any line from the show, even if one of the characters walking, they will make something big out of it.
Yep.
Or it could be the opposite. One character happens to do something and it just happens to be in the show.
And the more stories that you write, the more stories that you put out there, the more chances you have to capitalize on that fact.
It's actually a funny thing was when season 2 was running. It's like someone emailed me after the lunar eclipse episode. I was like, oh, past sins can explain why Luna changed size. because it's true. Because at the end of past sins, I had her growing to a more celestial-like thing. It's like, oh, there she is.
That was before that episode?
Yeah.
Oh wow, right on.
You had your hand
I just had a quick note, and that as far as jostling goes, as far as that may be one argument against writing the whole thing and then waiting. If the show contradicts what you were saying or whatever, now all of a sudden you have to put an alternate.
That is why I was very keen of getting Wise Beyond Her Years published. The last chapter of that published before season 4 started, because I'm very glad, because my theory of where the elements of harmony came from got out of water in the very first episode. And like I actually commented on this in the last chapter. It's like, let's watch a season 4 completely destroys this AU.
Actually, going back a little bit, where people are saying it's hard to predict what stories will do well, there are some things that are random events, like the Pinkie Pie watching paint dry, making Pinkie Pie watches paint dry more popular by like what 50%, like a couple weeks, something like that. There are certain things you can do to identify what type of stories will be more popular, and that's if you find stuff that are similar and different. Things the human brain likes things that it's familiar with. You know, it likes it's why you'll see authors. There's an author who's cranked out like 150 romance novels. They're basically the same novel, and 130 of them have been bestsellers. Because when she got popular, people kept reading it because they like that it's all very similar. The brain likes it similar. It likes being active, and it activates all the little synapses in the brain, and It's all.
It's the same reason why we're happy that we're getting a season 5. Because it's
Yes.
more, it's more of a little different, but still the same.
Yep.
Or why it's like when you finish a story, it's like some of your readers were going, we want more, sequel.
And so it's the same thing for different. Your brain will focus on stuff that's different, and if it already knows and likes it, it'll focus on it, and then you're in again a multiplying effect where your brain likes it's different, it likes it, it's the same, it'll pay attention to it. There's a few twists and turns thrown in, you know, the Brony writers, you know, self-insert that's a joke. It's very traditional. It's also a little bit different because it's making fun of it, and you know, you add in some humor, you add in a little bit of extra twist or turn or something that's obviously predictable, but you know, you didn't quite get it right, and it makes you think. The more you create brain activity in the reader, the more, not only will they like the story, the more they'll think about the story, and then they'll make comments, oh yeah, this is like that other story I wrote. Oh yeah, you know, what's your favorite story? Oh, I really like this, because there's been more activity in the brain.
I have a couple more points to add on to that. One of them is
I'll get to you in a minute.
romance stories actually have a very similar structure. They're very copy and paste in a lot of ways, and this is traditional category romance. That's why romance authors can literally write 10,000 words a day, and if they write any less, they're upset. And 2,000 words a day is very prolific, by the way. So that gives you an idea. And the similar but different thing, sounds like Moniz told me this last year, and I found it very profound. It actually changed the way I think of writing, is that everything is a combination of different ideas and done in a new way with the author's own personal touch added to it. For example, Game of Thrones is like Lord of the Rings plus Sopranos. And
A little bit less fantasy creatures.
yeah, and yeah, exactly. It's more of a low fantasy. So you see how that works, and that's one way you can actually create original ideas. And especially if it's two popular things combined together in a way that's never really been done before, with your own spin on it.
Yeah, and it's like
that will ensure success.
Well, yeah, no, it's like crossovers are generally kind of like interesting fodder for that, because like you generally are limiting your audience a little bit to people who have seen or are familiar with both content, like Ponies and it's like Ponies and Fallout. The Fallout series, people who don't play video games aren't going to be very familiar with that, where Fallout and the Sword of Shannara trilogy, which is a high fantasy series, well, you're not going to have as many people that don't read in that. But it's also kind of that similar but different thing where it's like, these two things I'm familiar with, but it's different because they're being smushed together, like peanut butter and bananas or something.
You've had your hand up for a while.
I meant to ask this to Penswork yesterday, but unfortunately he wasn't at Literary Merit. This is gonna... It actually kind of works a bit when it comes to getting popular. I've noticed that some people usually go to either a story or a movie or something like that is written, and there's times where they go, oh, like, I've seen this before, or I had absolutely no idea where it was going to go. So the question basically is, did you, whenever you do something new, do you know from the beginning where it's going to go, or do you build up as you go, or this is basically kind of like the second one, but do you add stuff based on fan comments?
It all depends on how you're writing. Like if you're going to do a story that's like chapter by chapter, then you have the opportunity to bring in fan comments and explore. It's like Kit Kat, that's part of the reason some aspects of the story bloated out near the, like explore.
Kit Kat had some big points, but then actually changed them and removed some and added others based off of the comments.
Yeah.
Which I had an idea.
Yeah, but if you're pre-writing like Gary suggested, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's like, then it's like, so it all depends. Like sometimes people want you to go where they think it's going to go because I want that ending. It's, but at the same time, it's like I'm referencing Consistence again. I put something on the cover I knew was going to get attention, but I knew I was going to be able to twist a bit to being sudden change, and that was Twilight with being ready to be hung.
Yeah.
It's like I never intended to kill Twilight in past sins, but I wanted to get as close as I could before I pulled that twist. And it's like, it's funny because I had to ruin it a little bit because I had to show people in the comments that it's like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to read it if Twilight. It's like, okay, I will give you this promise. It is rated everyone.
I was one of the ones who sent one of those comments.
What?
I don't want to send one of those phones.
It's like you don't.
Yeah, this is getting a bit far from making the big time, but I mean, one thing that we can kind of turn that back in is the idea of, you know, what promises are you making the reader that will draw them in?
Because if you make a promise to the reader and you fulfill that promise,
you are setting the hook. Yes.
It's like that person's got a greater incentive to become a follower. It's like, oh, it's a shipping fic between Appledeck and Draenodraft, but oh, at the end I'm not going to actually ship them. They're just going to be friends. It's like the person who came there for the ship is going to be going, no, I want that.
The beginnings of stories are very important. Don't mislead your readers.
Yeah. Yes.
Love your shirt, very nostalgic.
Yes.
So as far as, for lack of a better word, tactics and targeting that feature box on FIMFiction.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if I sort of did a storyline disservice. It seems to be nicely rated, you know, 49 likes, 0 dislikes, 600 views, you know. 6 chapters, but I publish them all at the same time at 3 in the morning.
Yeah. It's like doing it. Then it's like FIMFiction doesn't have an approval thing. As I recall, it's like it just goes up, right?
No, there's moderation.
Okay, there is a little moderation. So it's like hitting a good time is difficult. It's like with FIMFiction and EQD
They put it
because
up when they want.
well, yeah, exactly.
Well, and the problem is that they might start putting them up once every 10 minutes, so after 60 minutes you're not at the front page, so you're losing those views. But if you do it chapter by chapter, they don't like that because you're effectively gaming the system.
Well, that's link whoring, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that with FIMFiction, if you post multiple chapters in a single day, it'll only go to the updated slots once per day. So they don't care how many chapters you post, it's just only going to
They don't want you to have
refresh.
the story complete and then post up only the first chapter so that the next day you can release the next chapter, the next day you can release the next chapter.
No, that's a tactic that does seem to work though.
That's why they don't like it.
I have never seen you know, FIMFiction actually say do not do that.
It's other rules.
Really?
Yeah.
They say do not release content just to bump, but if you have new writing material,
They say don't hold back content so that you can post it later for a bump.
if that were true, then you would never be able to do what Gary's saying about writing your entire story at once.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the spirit of the rule is like, and it's like Pico said, it's like the story is marked as complete, even though it's only got 1 chapter. It isn't.
They're specifically referring to like editing and pre-reading. He's saying you have your story written and then you're going back and you're finishing off a chapter and releasing it. Then you go to the next chapter, you finish off it and release it.
I had a buffer. I kept a buffer.
Yeah, and a lot of people do that, and they'll do it like a week in between, but they don't want it to do every single day because the way that their math calculates it, that's the thing, they don't want you gaining their math.
Yeah.
And there's certain ways to game their math that they say, please don't do this because it's unfair to the other authors who like do a single chapter story that's maybe 10,000 words as opposed to, 10,000 words 2 at a time.
There's 2 important things to know about the feature box. The bottom 3 slots are for updates only, and the top 7 are for new stuff only. And the thing is, don't sweat getting and not getting into the featured box because here's the sad truth about the feature box. It is just pure numbers, and it's basically this really elaborate algorithm that no one knows.
It's 90 secret recipe.
Yeah, it's 90 secret recipe. And the highest, it's your heat. The higher your heat, the higher you get into that's how you get into the featured box. Top 7 heat is the featured box. The thing is, a really good story, I've seen like really, really fantastic stories with sub 100 views, and I've seen just complete and utter junk, just total schlock in the featured box. So the thing is, just don't sweat it. It's pure luck getting into the featured box. The one thing you can do to boost it, as they have said, is like kind of make sure you have a good back jacket, which is your title picture, your title itself, and your description. Back jackets are so important that there's a 4th year university class, and part of it's dedicated to just writing a back jacket for
Just writing the blurb.
Yeah.
But on your, like, to get back to the corporate question on timing, there are better times of the day to be posting. It's like, I think the general consensus is like, try to shoot for early, like
afternoon because...
Well, afternoon specifically for like East Coast or something. It's like, because
a lot of the people who post them up and approve it are on East Coast or European time.
Exactly.
And so when they go to bed, you stop. And so you want to be in there so you're at the later of the day. If you get really lucky, you'll be up there for like 10 hours because no one will be updating, and so
On the front
yeah,
page.
there's fewer people coming, but they're all looking, they're all senior thick as opposed to twice as many people.
That reminds me of a time where it's like one of my stories sat on the front page in the new stories thing because there was that lull where nobody on FanFiction was approving stories for like 3 or 4 days or something like that.
I've seen
They're
this
better
happen.
now.
Yeah, it's definitely more consistent now, but it's funny because if you look at their statistics graphs, you can see that day on the graph. It's like new story, new story, new story. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that back there.
Just from personal experience, even if you post it in the afternoon, you can never tell when it's going to go up because I tried posting a story at like, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It didn't go up until exactly 10 the next morning.
Yep.
It's sometimes it's a roll of the dice. It's a roll of the dice because like you push it on down the line and it depends if someone else is on the other end of the line.
You mentioned your pen earlier.
Yeah. When you say post it towards the East Coast and European time, do you mean when they are going to sleep or when they're active after work?
When they're active, because it's a moving window where it's like, oh, these people are active, and the people who are going to be west of them are going to be staggeringly active. So if you post it afternoon West Coast time, well then it's going to be several hours of just being over open ocean, and then it will be the afternoon time, roughly afternoon time in the Asian, Japan, Korea, those Asian things. And if you're posting an English story, that may not be where it's going to get a lot of things. But if you're doing the afternoon time for Europe or for East Coast North America, it's like afternoon. If you're doing it in Europe, then there's going to be a gap where it's going to be over the ocean, but then it's going to hit the time where it's like, oh, afternoon for East Coast.
They also usually will approve stuff when there's other people on, so because they have, they sit there with the chat window open, they're like, oh my god, this person, another, like, the last 3 fakes have been Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash, I don't know what's going on. Like, they have fun doing it. So they do it when other people are on, they do it when there's other people they can ask questions. If they're like, just make sure this doesn't conflict with this rule, or that this isn't a repeat of a different story,
So Europe or Eastern time, I guess which one? Should you go like when it's late in Europe, but early-ish in the East?
It's a roll of the dice, because like someone pointed out, it's like, they tried to post for that target thing and it didn't get approved to the morning end, but sometimes, so it's like you want to try to account for a little bit of lag time, but sometimes it's like, if Alex Straza sees one of my stories and he's still a approver on FIMFiction.
He's a approver and moderator, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's like, if he sees it, he's just like, oh, there it goes. It's like,
They will recognize you if you do a good job, which makes it easier to time it, kind of.
You can bribe him.
Another
you really don't like that at all.
Another thing,
No, it does work
I'll
sometimes.
get to your question in a moment, but another thing that you can do with that is that if you are doing other promotion, like for example, Reddit was mentioned, if you have announced to your followers list, I have a new story coming up on such and such a date, if you are working with an editor or a pre-reader, if you've passed it along to another author and they say, hey, I'd like to give this a boost as it goes live, it's much more important to time your story to make it convenient for that extra attention to come in.
That's one thing I've seen done on EQD in particular. Sometimes syncing things up can be very effective. Like someone will write a story, it'll be on FIMFiction, but they won't publish it until it's gone through EQD's thing. And so when it's like when EQD says, oh, it's going to go live here, okay, I'm going to open it up actually to the public just a little bit before that, so that it's like, oh,
the Equestria Daily boost gives you that 1-2 punch, and
then that may push you into the feature box, and it's a combo multiplier.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes.
To get back to the to get back to the publishing times on the East Coast, I actually am from the East Coast. I live in Massachusetts, so sometimes I'll publish a story, go through moderation sometimes in the morning. Sometimes it'll get approved quickly and be up in the afternoon or something like that. So.
Yeah, a roll of dice, really.
Yeah.
It's part of the law.
Pushing multiple stories at once.
That's interesting. Pushing multiple stories at once. My instinct would be to say space them out a little bit, because in the event that one of your stories strikes gold, you're
The
gonna
other
be
ones,
sucking,
you're
gonna be sucking views from yourself.
Yeah, no, it's kind of, it's like, that was one thing, like, some people were joking about, it's like, dude, you should have written up all your stories, copied all my stories when I was originally going to FIMFiction. It's like, I staggered it out. It's like, no, dude, you should have dropped them all on the same day and just own the feature box.
If the story's already popular and you know it's going to hit the feature box, like when Past Sins went over to FIMFiction, it's different. I would actually be cautionary if you are relying mostly on fans and a mention from other people, because it's in poor taste to have someone like post like, hey, my friend did this, he's a really cool person, he's helping out with this, and then next day, hey, he put out another story. Like it feels awkward, and it does feel like they're just gaming you as a reader. So then you're gonna, I mean, there could be some negative feelings about that. Plus, if your readers only have an hour in a day to read, or half an hour and they read one story and you have another one, they might wait to read that other one. So
No, I'm actually, it's like, I'm doing these summer, EQD summer achievement thing. It's like, I want to get several short stories done just because I want to get the low-hanging fruit. I'm tempted to try that now and see what happens. See what
for you.
Yeah.
It's an experiment.
Yeah, you have 6,000 readers, you know, you're
okay.
You'll be fine.
Yeah. Your front?
Yes. As far as different posting venues is concerned, again, EQD, DeviantArt, and FIMFiction. So if any of you have had experience, as you're posting to same or similar stories to multiple venues, have you found much difference in the tastes of various audiences? Again, I have a story that on DeviantArt has 5,000 views. It was very well received. Brought it over to FIMFiction, like a year later, and it's just,
it languished.
A couple hundred views. Yeah.
Some of it was probably maybe a bit of timing. You may have had at the time more watchers on DeviantArt or something. I don't know what those numbers look like.
Well, it came in through EQD in this particular case.
Oh, so EQD.
EQD promoted this back when it was the star system. It was a 6-story.
Okay, so it's like back then. It's like this. It was
2011.
Back then, it was like you were using DeviantArt instead of what other authors were using Google Docs for the hosting. Yeah. Okay, so it's like then it's like that really isn't really posting to DeviantArt. That was posting to EQD at the time. DeviantArt was just being the host, and it was just being another place to record the views, because it's like that. The views there is really some of the natural ones that were generated on DeviantArt plus the ones that were coming in from EQD, where it's like on FIMFiction, that one was just all on its own.
Right.
It's getting the numbers there. But as for the venues, there is definitely different tastes. It's like
part of its experience level. People who go to DeviantArt, start on DeviantArt, found ponies, don't know about FIMFiction a lot of times, or are less familiar with it. So they're more likely to see DeviantArt, so you'll see a lot more intro type stories to the fandom do better on DeviantArt. At the same time, a lot of the more experienced authors will post to FIMFiction, not to DeviantArt. So if you have a good story on DeviantArt, it will do better than the equivalent story on FIMFiction, because there's less competition with equivalent level stories.
And another thing about it is like what I tend to do for DeviantArt, especially if I get a cover art commissioned or even if I Photoshop one up, is I'll throw the cover art up on DeviantArt, because DeviantArt is really more about art and it's more about people looking at pictures. Like, oh, that's a pretty picture. I'll click that. It's like, and it's like if they want to read the story, then after they've been drawn in with the visual picture, because each DeviantArt really doesn't do the thumbnail for the stories very well. Yeah. It's like it's either just the text or it's whatever you pick for the picture, and it doesn't work as well as just saying, oh, just that. It's DeviantArt for the cover art, and I'll pull in some more folks there and direct them to FIMFiction.
You got a question way in back?
Feature box.
Yeah. We had a question way in back. Yes. Yes. Trampoline. Yes.
Could you guys comment on, since we're talking about popularity and stuff, the various uses and types of blog posts?
The uses, can we comment on the uses and types of blog posts?
It's like, some people get their followers for their blog posts. I mean, Bad Horse, Wanderer D,
book player a lot.
Book player. It's like,
less than
does Nike have any stories?
I don't think so.
So yeah, so it's like some people may be following him just for the side announcements, even though those automatically propagate to a specific section.
And the trick with having an account more like that is that you're a lot of times making comments on other people's stories, doing a review and saying, hey, you know, they're like, oh, thank you, that was really helpful. It's like, oh yeah, if you want to learn more, you know, you can say that, you know, I have a blog post, and then they'll say, hey, this really helped me out. That's what blog posts, that's how blog posts become popular, is people saying this was really helpful and referencing each other. It's all word of mouth.
And it previously mentioned was the idea of consistency. The more that people come to rely on you saying something that they like to read, the more that they will follow you and give you their attention. That applies double to blog posts. All of the names that were just mentioned, you know, Book Player, Bad Horse, like John Perry's Soccer's and Featureboxed series, these are all things that have gained popularity because they regularly blog, and they blog about specific topics, and you can rely on following them and having more of the same.
Wanderer D has the 2 icons for the absolute horrible.
Yeah. As much recently.
Yeah, as much as
he was.
yeah,
Like every couple of weeks he was doing it.
Like the don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Terrible writer and something. Yeah, it was
something. I remember that.
Yeah. I think those are adorable. Our Everfree Northwest has a FIMFiction group account. We've been posting weekly fan fiction spotlights of 3 things. And we've gotten 50 followers because we'll do that and say, hey, just so you know, we featured your story on our weekly thing. We thought it was really cool. And then they'll say, oh my god, like this is, thank you. And sometimes you get the authors following us. Sometimes the authors will do a blog post saying, hey, just let you know my thing was featured over here on this site. And we don't force it, you know, we just let them know. And some choose to blog about our fan fiction spotlight.
Yes.
So one question I had is, you guys have talked about Equestria Daily a few times. One thing I've never fully understood is that, like, the impression I get is that Equestria Daily features things that have basically been submitted multiple times, and then the curators of the site finally, like, they've got so much content coming in that they probably, okay, can you talk
The
about
best
that?
example of that is a story we won't discuss in depth, but it's called Cupcakes. If a lot of people are saying this is really good, they will. In the past, they have made exceptions. They've
become a little bit more stricter on the rules recently.
Yes, especially once they became a more popular site for certain. Because the reason they did like Cupcakes was because of the content. It wasn't considered appropriate. It's one of like 3 fics that I think they wish they had never posted. So
it's like technically Fallout Equestria breaks so many rules.
At the time, it didn't.
At the time of posting, it did, but then it kind of got into it in certain aspects.
It is so popular, it just got grandfathered. But
yeah,
one statement I do want to make. This is kind of like the anarchist statement here. Honestly, don't sweat getting Equestria Daily featured anymore. It's just not really worth the effort, or it's not worth just the pain and suffering that you have to go through. It's I'm like, submit your stories there. It's nice to get a boost, but Equestria Daily has, in terms of an accolade, has grown less and less relevant for the past year and a half. And
for fan fiction in particular.
For fan fiction.
For Tumblr spotlights, for comic things.
Oh, that's I'm just talking about writing.
Gets more views than Equestria Daily more than half the time. Though I will say Equestria Daily does have their app, and that isn't accounted for. That is the trick, is that their app, a lot of people will check, but a lot of people use EQD for news. They don't use it for...
Yeah, it's for news, yeah.
Yeah, occasionally art.
So, Gary Oak, are there any other review groups that are taking the place of Equestria Daily?
Yes, it's called the Royal Guard. We use 3 pre-readers at least for every story instead of 1 for Equestria Daily. We do that to eliminate, and here's the thing, Equestria Daily, I've definitely seen bias issues. Okay, here's an example. As a pre-reader for the Royal Guard, I have rejected more stories that are featured on Equestria Daily that are written by Equestria Daily pre-readers than I have accepted. Like, that many fall below our standards, and our mechanical standards are less than that of Equestria Daily, but our substantive standards are higher. And what we do is we have 1 pre-reader just skim through for obviously bad grammatical
problems. It doesn't look like you use new lines and whatnot.
And then we have 2 tier 2 pre-readers. The tier 2 guys, we really closely analyze it, and if you get 2 approvals, it's up. If you get a split decision, you need a 3rd pre-reader. And the thing is, pre-readers are not allowed to read stories by people they've edited for or people they know. Like, I could not read something like, I couldn't approve Pico's story, I couldn't touch
he
it.
could help me, but he then can't let other people know that you helped.
Well, I can help him edit it, that's fine, but I can't actually pre-read it and give it an approved or approval pending or rejected.
For the Royal.
Yeah, for the Royal Guard.
And here's a lesson for the people who want to go from fan fiction to being a real world author.
Yeah.
They're basically different publishers. EQD
Yes.
has their standards, their things they focus on is a lot more mechanical. The Royal Guard is a lot more substantive. They have their own ways of doing something, and in fan fiction, the publisher itself will give you a huge boost. In the real world, the publisher works for advertising, but it's not like the publisher's name itself is what gives you the boost.
Yeah, it's that your book is alive. Your publisher gives your book life and puts it in the stores.
And if they're advertising for it, they develop a campaign for it, but it's not like, it's, what's one of the publishing companies out there?
Penguin.
Penguins. It's not like to say a Penguin book. No, who cares? I mean.
Yeah.
They put that little logo on it, but that's about
it, like Tor and all that stuff.
And you will see it for audiobooks though.
Yeah.
Because audiobooks is a lot.
Well, yeah, just because it's like blah blah blah. It's because they're reading it out loud. It's not. It's like you can't. It's like it's not going. This is the story of this. By this. Read by this, and then they whisper quietly, and it's like no, you can't do that.
So where is this Royal Guard?
Pardon me?
Where is this Royal Guard? Is it a
It's a FIMFiction group.
Oh, it's a group on FIMFiction.
Yeah, a group on FIMFiction called the Royal Guard.
And what's your thing? You guys actually find
We're the
your
Royal
stuff.
Canterlot Library, but we don't accept self-submissions, so You had your hand up for a while?
Yes, I know that there's various styles of formatting, but does that play a factor in popularity?
Yes. Things that are unique and interesting will get a boost because the people who read it will find it unique and interesting.
The white box. I think.
So there's a story written entirely in what's it called? The iambic pentameter?
Shakespearean iambic pentameter.
Yeah, and people who like that will comment on like, oh my god, this is different and interesting. Stories that are written entirely in note or in a diary format are different, and if they're done well, people will like them. People will comment, and they're more likely to do a like or a favorite.
Yeah, but keep in mind that you are kind of building yourself into a niche market sometimes if you do that. Like for example, my story with the least views overall is called Melt. It is a poem. It is a long form poem, which is a takeoff of T.S. Eliot. Nobody. I mean, even after a feature from the Seattle's Angels, it's still under 1,000 views. So. Yeah.
Does it? Can you host like PDF downloadable printable things like that on there at all?
On FIMFiction?
I don't think so.
Technically, no. FIMFic will let you download a story.
You can download a story from FIMFiction
as an HTML, as an EPUB, and as a .txt.
Well,
I think so. Yeah.
Those are the three formats, but it's like FIMFiction is really just you can throw pictures in, but that's not going to transfer to a .txt, and I think it actually pulls it out for the EPUB too. So it's only
formatting might be screwed up or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
like
a feature for
the BB code is very fussy. I actually went through the EPUB for past sins after someone pointed it out to me. It's like, oh, this thing, it's broken. It's like, how is that my fault? It's like weird things about the BB code. Like for example,
I had to delete letter just the B from a bold and replace the B, and then it suddenly works.
But no, for me it was always like you can't have the multi-line italics or something. It's like you have to have center. Like every line has to be open and closed, and that sucks. If you're doing like in past sins, I have the
flashbacks.
What?
The flashbacks.
Yep. No, not that. The
extra chapter.
No, the play program thing for the play. Yes, that one.
Yeah.
It's like that was all in italics, and that's a bunch of new lines and centers and.
Yeah, and it screws up the space.
All right, let's stick with the popularity issue. You had your hand up for a while.
We sort of drifted away from what I was going to talk about, so probably wouldn't be relevant anymore.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, come on, Cam, bring it on.
What I was going to say about publishers is not always, but like when Game of Thrones came on television, people started looking at books, and then all of a sudden, a lot of books by the same publisher who did the published Game of Thrones all of a sudden got a bit of popularity as well, purely because they happen to have the same publisher, even though that has absolutely nothing.
Here's the trick to that. In a lot of books, at the back, the publisher will put other books that they think people will like based off of the choices selection. It's like going to YouTube and seeing something on the side that's recommended based off of the same video. You might not have found it on its own, but because they said, hey, you like this, you might like this.
Yeah, and FIMFiction will give you that halo effect because on your story page, if you have written other stories, they will show up in that right-hand sidebar. So so I mean, if you write something, Twilight Sparkle leads to Peach, and all of a sudden it explodes into Peach featureboxedness, then people will come and they'll see things. I mean, I've actually several times clicked in a story on the feature box and then sort of like, well, this is vaguely interesting, and then I see something in the author's sidebar that actually looks kind of cool, and I'll read that instead. Yes?
I don't use FIMFiction much for my posts, and I wanted to know, because I'm not familiar with ones where they have a feature like the feature box. Should that be considered a priority for the time you posted over the schedule your audience will? Because I've noticed, for example, the audience I primarily get is usually around 9 a.m. this time, or it's at midnight. So I'm not sure which.
Where do you normally publish?
Normally on Tumblr. I'm just asking for in case of something on French, like on FIMFiction. Should you prioritize it on when you seem to be getting the most people observing it, or on when you
FIMFiction doesn't tell you the time that people are looking at it. You can see the time of comments.
Yeah.
The other thing about FIMFiction being featured is that anything, like if you have like 5 editors or people, friends looking at, telling you opinions of your story, and they upgrade it before it's posted or before it goes live on FIMFiction, like say you have to have it viewable for EQD to approve it, but then if they post it up before it gets up on FIMFiction, all the views and all the thumbs up and comments that you get before it's actually up on FIMFiction don't count towards heat, and heat decays over time.
Yes. Told me that's not true.
Oh, did they?
I asked him what had happened to me, and he said that it doesn't matter.
Really?
Oh, they might
wow.
have changed that. Then.
Yeah, that they must have changed it then.
He's always upgrading. That's one of the reasons why FIMFiction is nice, is because it's always.
Oh yeah, no, it is a really well done website, and that's the one thing to say, and why it's like if you're writing stories for this community, FIMFiction will really be a priority for posting, because like I know there's fanfiction.net, but it's like people have gotten used to coming to FIMFiction specifically because that's what they're looking for. That's like going to a specific area of fanfiction.net or something, but at the same time, FIMFiction is a really awesome website if you look at it
My
technically.
Little Pony fanfiction is like the 4th most posted fanfiction in the world, like in terms of total number of stories, and we haven't been around nearly as long as a lot of other
like Star Trek,
Harry Potter.
Star Trek, Star Wars, Harry Potter.
Where did you get that number? That's interesting.
That was actually on a post that was linked from or FanFiction. They did a post on them, or someone was doing a FanFiction post about FanFiction and the most popular stories in the world, and they said, My Little Pony, there's X many stories, you get the stories off of FIMFiction, you compare it towards the list on fanfiction.net, which...
And so you don't get the double ups.
You don't get the double ups, because if you're just looking on FanFiction, some are posted to both.
Yeah.
And then you compare it over, and we're 4th or 5th.
Oh, cool.
And that was several years ago.
Oh my goodness.
That was like 1 or 2 years ago, so...
Well, I think, didn't FIMFiction just recently pass the 1 billion word mark?
I think so.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, we have over 60,000 stories, something like that.
Like, to give you an idea, FIMFiction is always jostling with Equestria Daily for #1 most active and most viewed brony website in the world.
They've been in the top 2,000 websites in the world.
Yeah, just neck and neck.
Whoa.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
We're awesome, people.
Yes.
And yet they only have that like one little ad on the side and one little ad on the bottom.
Which is really cool.
It's really nice.
Though they had to, it's like that was the funny thing that happened completely off topic about them having to cut one of their ad providers because it's like suddenly, that website.
They're doing audio interruptions, and it's like I'm reading, suddenly like 3 minutes into reading on this page, an audio ad pops up.
Well, no, it's like one of the second ad provider, not the AdSense that they've been using, the second one started throwing up ads that were making people's computers go, oh no, that's a bad website.
Yep.
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
Question, do you have him?
Yeah. So I've noticed when posting a new chapter to my stories that as soon as it goes up, about 10 minutes later, it's already pushed to the bottom of the new updates list.
Yeah.
So what's the good balance between updating at a time where enough people will see it, but also at a time where enough people are on?
To be honest, I don't think you're going to get any significant number of views from that front page updates list. I mean,
My first story got 500 views in 24 hours. The only thing I did was put it up. It happened to be on the front page.
Well, no, the front page.
Well, no,
when you publish a news story,
that's the news story.
when you
We're
publish
talking
a
about the
news
update.
story, you get a lot of stuff.
The news story is here, the updates are here.
Yeah. The I mean,
just because
I have posted substantial updates and gotten like literally 2 new views out of it. From people who are not already following me. So I think at that point what you want to do is you want to start working on synergy. I mean, if you have a story that is already in progress, you've got a good, established, backlog for it. It can be hard getting people interested in something that is not, fresh.
And sometimes some people are waiting for a story to be completed. It's like, I had that happen on From the Depths, because it's like, I shouldn't have not have done what I did because I wanted to write, it's like, I wanted it for Halloween, so I put the first chapter on Halloween, and then that turned into a story where I was writing every chapter as they went. But it's like, sometimes people won't read stories until they're finished because they're trying to avoid the story that goes on canceled or hiatus, and it's like no! I want to know what happens. I can't deal with this heartbreak again.
But I think the I think the happy medium there is that if you have, like, say, you mentioned earlier your 6-chapter story, if you post the first chapter and an update schedule and say chapters 2 through 6 are going to be on such and such dates, and that is the entire thing, people will give that credit generally, as long as you have a regular update schedule, the next best thing you can do is just try and see if you can post to other groups, get your stories reviewed, get people who like the story to talk about it, especially if you feel like it's not getting as much attention as it could, because you're getting like these awesome comments and people love it and they're raving about it, but nobody's reading it. See if you can sort of push at it from a different direction. Yes.
Just sort of tangential, something I've noticed that's been happening lately, becoming more popular, is audiobook and dramatic readings. Just how influential do you think that is, for an author these days? Is it this fringe little world inside, or is this a good way to get to the mainstream?
Some people don't read. Some people just listen. Just because I'm taking the train, like the metro to work, but I can't read on the train or the bus because I'll get sick. So they'll listen to something. And so it's like some people, that's the only way they're going to enjoy your story. So you're getting some readers you were not going to be getting earlier. At the same time, if it's someone who does a lot of readings, then the fact that they've chosen to do your story next, that's going to mean something to their followers, and some of their followers might go and read that story ahead of time and then still listen to the audiobook just because it's like, oh, this person likes it, I'll go like it too.
Have either of you had books done audio readings?
I had I wrote a story called The Sundering, which is one I submitted to college, and it's basically a literary retelling of the whole Celestia Nightmare Moon banishment thing that's very similar to the season 4 scene, even though it was written a year and a half before that. Someone just randomly is like, oh yeah, I wanted to do a dramatic reading of that. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I consider dramatic readings to be accolades, especially if you have someone like Obab Scribbler read your story. I haven't had that honor yet, but that's a real badge of honor if you have someone like her read yours.
That's especially if it's a longer story that it's like
still chapters updating.
Yeah. Or like I don't know the YouTube name, but he goes by Morgan Free Pony on Second Life. He's like whole past sentence. And that's like 16 hours or something.
Well, there's multiple versions of past sins out there, I believe.
Yeah, but I think he was the first one to really finish. And it's a really, he's got the good...
And if you have a really good telling, like someone, like Mike the Microphone started doing them a long time ago with really silly, obviously, Twilight and Trixie are blimps and now they're being shipped together. He does this and he makes it, and he adds to the story by making it extra silly with his voice. I mean, we did it at the chill out last night. We were up until 2 a.m. literally until we were forced out by the hotel reading a story that was obviously a troll fic, but reading it out loud made it so much better because you're like, no, that's not what they said. And then you see it. It's a different experience, and so it's different and similar, and you get that going, and then you also get, sometimes, a stand-up comedian can tell a joke that's written down, and it's just funnier.
So I guess my question was, what happened to your numbers when that happened?
Mine didn't really go up much because it wasn't a really well-known audiobook. But the thing is, if it's like, as I said, Bob Scribbler, that's going to go. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's more exposure, and you can thank that person by kind of doing a FIMFiction blog post. That's what I do whenever someone kind of does one of these new things. It's like I'll give them the plug.
I put it in my story description too, like dramatic reading. Listen here.
And a lot of times you'll see a lot more people following the person than getting views. Because they'll say, oh, I don't need to read it. I mean, I just listened to it. But I'll follow this person because they seem to be doing other similar things that are good that I would like to read sometime.
Or maybe you can find out about they'll say, oh, another story this person wrote is now an audiobook.
Yep. Yeah. Again, it's a lot about that, building up synergy. We got about 10 minutes left. Any more questions? I saw a hand up there earlier.
Me?
Yes.
I was going to go another comment on the fact that, for example, on the whole, like, if you read something horrible, how it actually becomes funny as opposed to just mind-numbingly horrible. For example, that was before this trip began. I explained to Gary the premise of the whole work and Gary called My World. And he started basically crying. And everyone started reading out to it, and he was actually laughing instead.
Fangs can.
You're all right.
That could be an expert.
Yes. Yes.
Have you guys ever considered or worked on collaborations with other writers?
That's a good question.
I did Pwn Murder.
Yeah.
The Pwn Murder thing with also the other couple of the other League of Extraordinary Gentlefolks events, and so it is definitely interesting, and it can be really fun, especially if you make it kind of a game. So Pwn Murder was interesting because they did it after the Dwarf Fortress something murder thing, where it was first person writes a chapter, next person reads that chapter, but then the person after can only read the second chapter to write the third. And so the whole story, which comprised about 16 authors, and I was the last one, I had to tie it all together. It's like, I was told, up to about chapter 13, it was this really brooding, developing thing of backstabbing and all this stuff. And then Wonder and T got a hold of it. His chapter went completely off the rails. Then Golden Vision wrote hers, and hers was completely off the rails. And mine ended up being an epic space concert battle fight, where Discord borrowing the Enterprise, and an army of Trixie, army of Octavia space alien clone things merging together into a giant one, and then giant fighting robots, and
that sounds like a lot of trouble.
But it can be really fun. But at the same time, working collaboratively with an author can definitely, another author, especially if it's one you respect, it's like, great secret of something that never happened, unfortunately, was K-Cat wanted to work with me and Batty Gloom on a third-person perspective because she had just finished Fallout Equestria. That was all first-person, so she was completely out of practice for third-person perspective, and she wanted to do a third-person noir. And noir and third-persons has got a very particular flavor to it. And so we actually hammered out a few chapters where we were experimenting with how that would sound. It didn't go anywhere, but it was kind of like, oh, no, no, no. Then it's like, well, how many brains could we have exploded?
Yeah. Collaborations have their own challenges above and beyond just your own writing, but in terms of popularity, you are basically taking everybody who's interested in both you and the other author and smushing them together. So I mean, you're doubling
you're going to get some redundancies probably, but
you're essentially doubling your audience overnight,
but then there's the logistical issues, like whose FIMFiction account does it get posted on? It's like for Pwn Murder that was easy. There is the Gentleman FIMFiction account, which represents the League of Extraordinary Gentlefolks Writing Society of Doom thing.
Yeah, but I mean, like the benefit of that, I mean, another thing that can happen there is that my most popular fiction by far is Hard Reset 2, Reset Harder. There's a lot of people here who have who have read Eakin's Hard Reset, I wrote a semi-sequel to it where it's basically an alternate universe take in which Twilight is not the only time looper. Eakin plugged it, and I mean, we were collaborating in the sense that I was getting a lot of help from him, and he was pre-reading and editing, but he's got 10 times my followers, and so I got this, I mean, it became overnight my most popular story, simply on that halo effect.
And that is a title that makes people just want to read because they know it's
two. Yeah, so the thing is that, I mean, if you do a collaboration, I mean, especially if you're working with a more well-known author, that's a great way to get right into the middle of things immediately. So, I mean, yeah, it's definitely worth trying.
But don't go begging for it. That's the one thing is like, I've had to write that kind of set. I'm sorry, but I can't just drop what I'm writing and collaborate with you on this person I do not know.
Yeah. Yes?
Are there any subjects or topics that should be avoided?
Well, okay. I will say, and this is something I mentioned last year as well, that if you are using OCs, expect literally about a 10-fold drop in views from using canon characters. And this is not to say that OCs are bad. Some of my favorite stories on the site are essentially original fiction. But the thing is that people come to FIMFic to read about the characters we already like.
And that's not to say you can't include original characters, but you kind of got to sneak them in on the slide.
And they work better if you're doing world building more than like a character focused story.
Yeah, like if you're doing world building about, it's like, it's the Griffin Kingdom, well, unless you're making it about Gilda and Gustav, you're going to have to throw in some original characters. And that's fine, people will read that, it's like, oh, Griffins, awesome! Or the Minotaurs, like, one weird thing, I do a Skype RP group, and one of the weird things that we came up with, just as a weird, like, this became part of our world, is Iron Will is actually a small Minotaur because most of his national comrades are a bit dumber and a bit larger, kind of like the smarter the Minotaur is, the smaller they get in stature, and so it's like, But it's like world building OCs are much more understandable. If you're wanting to do it in Ponyville and be about it's like, oh, it's this OC inner working and kind of being around the community. It's like, start off with the characters that people want to read. Like, oh, my OC is going to be like the new male mayor that got Derpy fired or something, and now she's going to be vengeful. Well, have the first chapter be Derpy's getting fired, and that will get people in the door and reading, and then you can kind of, oh, but here's the OC. Oh, but this is still a cool story.
And technically, as FIMFiction's crossover characters, like GLaDOS from Portal series, technically that's an OC as far as FIMFiction is concerned, but that won't be a negative impact. A lot of people say, oh my god, I love GLaDOS, so they'll read it just for the GLaDOS.
And just remember, there's only one true law of writing, and that is, if it works, it works.
You don't question.
It's like you don't question which fics of yours get super popular. Like Ronin Rider's still, I think, baffled a bit by why what was supposed to be a joke is now a semi-serious story that is insanely popular. Or I'm trying to think, like Milo Dashi just jumping in popularity. It's like, who is that again? That's RG Beef? Or is that Rob Caker?
Rob Caker.
And it's like, he kind of wishes he never wrote that one because it's...
Keep in mind, 2 years after it was posted, it made the feature box like 3 times. Like,
yeah.
It's just one of those fics that...
Well, I think one of those times was because of, someone put the YouTube video out.
Stuff like that.
Live, it's like...
But that's also the Time Machine to 2011 effect going on. Exactly. Like back in 2011, you want to get featured on Equestria Daily? Can you write a sentence? It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be a good sentence, but is it a sentence?
It can't be a sentence that's too similar to what someone else wrote.
Yes, that's right. There you go. Congrats, you're on EQD. Yeah.
But there was a thought.
Back when EQD was make or break for your reputation.
But it's also just kind of like being kind of the first. Like K-Cat was the first Fallout Equestria crossover, and that spawned so many others, and some of those others are really good and have their own fandoms thing, but hers was the first.
Yep.
Mine was one of the first, I think. Novels A and B, just like Nightmare Moon get like long form getting redeemed that isn't being blasted by a rainbow.
Okay, so
or My Little Dash was the first to do its thing and da-da-da-da-da.
we are basically out of time here, so let's go ahead and just, if everyone wants to leave the room with one parting thought for making your fic, more popular, getting it more exposure, let's just kind of go across here.
Honestly, put the effort in to make a good fic first, but then the effort to make, to get it out there second. Don't drive yourself crazy, and honestly, if you want to be happy as a writer, judge yourself by the connections you make with others, because even if you never see more than 10 followers or 10 views for a story, if you make 3 good friends off of that, you know what, you're better than a lot of the stories that make 3,000 views.
I would just suggest write what you want to write, be honest with yourself and with others, and just put your best effort into everything you do, and put yourself out there, and just hope you get that. You just hope to get lucky off that. Just do as best you can, and you may or may not be rewarded. Who knows? It might happen.
Yeah. I would say use the community to your best advantage. We have a room full of people here, most of whom will be at the FanFiction meet and greet tonight, starting at 7 p.m. Come back and join us. Make some friends. Make those connections. Use the community. Be willing to read each other's stories and say, hey, this is actually good, go see this. And when that happens to you, take it as the compliment that it is. Find other people who are willing to help you edit, people who are willing to collaborate with you, because when you start making those connections, the popularity just kind of flows from that. And in the meantime, you will be learning more, you will be getting great things out of Pony, and that's what it's about.
I got one thing before I say mine. I cannot hear the word turn of phrase "make some friends" without hearing that.
Make some friends.
Exactly. But my thing to say is, don't strive to write the story that's going to be the one that captures lightning and makes you famous, because you're never going to be able to really predict that beforehand. It's like, write the stories you want to write, have fun writing, get it out there. And it's like you can never be sure what will be the thing that strikes the lightning, but you can't get it unless you put up the lightning rods.
Do you want a good example of having not being able to predict bottling lightning, and just something that how did this get successful?
Pony!
Yeah. All right.
That's actually very profound.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all very much. We'll be here for questions afterwards.